How's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Uh, a lot to get into this week. We are continuing the team previews. This week, I'll be going over St. Mary's, LMU, and Pacific. And I was also able to grab head coach of the Lions, Stan Johnson. So we'll talk with him a little bit about where he sees his LMU squad heading, how they look early on. Obviously, there's only been a couple weeks of practice, so still a lot to kind of look at and get into, but some exciting stuff. We'll dive into previewing all three teams, but we're going to start with WCC Media Day, which was just this past week, and for sake of conversation, what was also released was the WCC preseason poll, as well as the all WCC teams. So both were released this past week, and just taking a look at the lists of what we have here, the first thing that's going to stand out is obviously where everyone was picked, and it starts off with St. Mary's being the coach's pick to win the WCC, not Gonzaga. And obviously, like, it's usually a shock whenever Gonzaga is not picked to win the league. But I think there's also something to be said about just what we know of St. Mary's going into the year and what we don't know about Gonzaga. We know what some of the known commodities are for St. Mary's. We know about Aidan Mahaney. We know about Mitchell Saxon coming back. We know about Alex Dukas, all of whom made the all WCC team. We know this is a deeper bench. They return near everyone. They return most of the scoring from a year ago. Yes, and we'll dive into exactly what they lose. But there's a lot of known parts to St. Mary's. And then on the flip side for Gonzaga, it's a lot of unknown. A lot of new guys going to be in the starting lineup, a lot of new guys who are going to be coming off the bench. You do have Nolan Hickman, Anton Watson, and Ben Gregg, who are the known guys of this squad. But everybody else, while there's a lot of talent, a lot of high expectations, there's still a lot of mystery to what we might see. And that's probably why we saw St. Mary's end up being number one and not Gonzaga. And a quick note on that, it's not like it's a huge difference between the total point total and the number of coaches that picked St. Mary's over Gonzaga. It was 5-4, and then it was 61-60 in the total points. So let's not actually dive too. You can't read too much into it, because essentially it was a coin flip. And I think that's really what it does seem like going into the year, that it will be a coin flip between St. Mary's and Gonzaga. It was the first time the St. Mary's was picked to win the league since 2017, 2018. As a number of Gonzaga folks have pointed out on social media in the last week, last time that did happen, Gonzaga ended up sweeping the regular season and the tournament title outright. So St. Mary's missed the tournament that year. So it wasn't like just because St. Mary's was picked that they ended up winning the league. Obviously, we know that this is way early. There's a lot of unknowns. You don't know what's going to happen as the season rolls on. But St. Mary's won, Gonzaga 2. That was the pick by the coaches. The next kind of interesting thing was going to be, where did the coaches have this next lot of three, which I think seems like the clear separation of LMU, USF, and Santa Clara, and how did they rank these three, and where did they see those three finishing up? And to no surprise to me, they also are lumped very closely together. And the way it ended up going was USF was 3, LMU 4, and Santa Clara 5. The three of them separated by a total of 4 points, 45, 42, and 41, respectively. So I think this is another case of kind of flip a coin, roll the dice, because any one of these three could end up in third. Any one of these three could end up in fifth. I think there's a lot. All three of them did very well in the portal. All three of them, I think, have a lot of expectations going into the year. And it's going to be really fascinating to see how that all works out. And then the rest of the poll, Portland at 6, kind of no surprise for me there. And then at the bottom tier, Pepperdine at 7, Pacific at 8, and San Diego 9. The only thing I might have changed in here, the way I think it might end up working out, is I might have flipped Pepperdine and Pacific. But really, that's kind of where I would. This is close to where I'm going to have everything. Obviously, a few weeks left. Some things can happen. Injuries can happen. We can get reports on health, whatnot. So, it's not far off from what I think most everyone is anticipating for this conference this year. And then the preseason team. And yes, I know that one of the big complaints that a lot of people have with the WCC teams is that there are 10 members of the first team, and why don't you just make a second team out of that, or if you have a second team, or then make it 3 teams. In any case, there are 10 members of the all WCC preseason team. And as I mentioned before, Alex Dukas, Aidan Mahaney, and Mitchell Saxon are the 3 St. Mary's representatives. Gonzaga also has 3 Graham Ike, Ryan Nemhard, and Anton Watson. Portland with 1 rep, Tyler Robertson. Pepperdine with a couple with Houston Millette and Javon Porter. LMU with Kelly Laupepe. And that rounds out the all WCC team for the preseason. No surprises, really. I think what you have is a lot of, again, known commodities, known ability levels in the WCC, and that's what's represented here. I think you took the 3 best from Gonzaga, you took the 3 best from St. Mary's. That makes sense. You have Houston Millette and Javon Porter. I don't think anybody doubts what those 2 are capable of down at Pepperdine. Porter, I've mentioned, is probably maybe the best NBA prospect of anybody in this class. I think you had to get Kelly Laupepe on this list, one of the tougher players in the league, one of the more experienced guys in this league. I don't think there was a way around not having him on that team. Same goes for Tyler Robertson. Like, you're talking about overall, like, well-rounded players. Like, Tyler Robertson is one of those guys in the league. And then because you have a lot of new faces around the league otherwise. So I think this was kind of a fair assessment. I know, like, there were some people, I saw some chatter about there's no one from USF, no one from Santa Clara. I don't think that should necessarily be a surprise right now, because a lot of new pieces. And so we'll just have to see how that all goes, because for Santa Clara, you don't have like a Keyshawn Justice. You don't have a Brandon Pajemski right now. Maybe there are guys on this roster who turn into them. A few guys I could see breaking into this list by the time we get the season end, like Christoph Tilley, Adama Ball. We could see Mike Sharavjams jump into here. Could be Jonathan Mogbo. Like, there's plenty of candidates on these teams to make an all WCC team by the end of the year. But I think, like, far as the all WCC team as it is, this 10 makes sense. There's not a whole lot I would really like scoff at or disagree with. So what we have, I think, works. And I don't really have any complaints. Or again, like, I'm not going to overanalyze, because you can overanalyze these to the end of days of just like, oh, does this fit? Does that fit? It's like, the fact is, like, we haven't played a game yet. And we don't have it's another few weeks before we play a game. I'm not going to read too much into what this list is. But these are established guys who make sense to be on that sort of list. All right. And with that, I'm going to transition into the team previews. And with no real segue, we're going to start this one with St. Mary's. And for St. Mary's, I have long thought that this is a year where they could break through. Well, not, I'm going to say breakthrough, because, like, obviously they've been a 5 seed the last couple of years. This is a team that got to the second round of the tournament a year ago. This is a team that won 27 games. They were tied for first. It was a disaster in the conference title game, but this was a team that maybe played the toughest game, the most competitive game against UConn in the entire tournament a year ago. And who knows if Alex Dukas remains healthy, how that game ends up. I don't think that necessarily means that they win, but that game could have been far more competitive going down the road if he had stayed healthy. So, thinking about this St. Mary's team, where this team is, high expectations, as is normal. I think it's very safe to say that this is a team that expects to not only be back in the NCAA tournament, but also does expect to be a higher, like somewhere in a top 6 seed in their region. I don't think that's far-fetched. I don't think that's out of line. I think this team has the ability to do so. But they do lose a couple of key pieces, and I think we can't lose sight of that Logan Johnson and Kyle Bowen really were the key components to this gritty, not pretty mentality that this St. Mary's team has had over the last few years. Logan Johnson, arguably the best on-ball defender on the West Coast, or if not one of. He obviously one of the best defenders on the West Coast. If you could stick a guy on him and that you didn't have to worry the rest of the night. He was that good a defender. Kyle Bowen was kind of like was the anchor down low defensively. Like he was another guy. It's like he was going to be that quarterback back there and really be directing traffic. So between those two, you lose a lot of toughness. You lose a lot of leadership. You lose the key components to a team that was a top 15 defensive team each of the last 3 years. And while I don't think there's going to be a huge drop-off on that front, there will be a drop-off. I don't think you can look at this team and not think that there will be at least a little bit of a defensive drop-off from that elite level that they were with those two guys, because they don't have a Logan Johnson on this team. They don't have a Kyle Bowen on this team. But they still have a lot. And it all starts with Aidan Mahaney. Aidan Mahaney was the breakout star of a year ago. We know what he was able to accomplish, what he did against Gonzaga in Moraga to lift them to that win. We know what he did at BYU in the final game in the Marriott Center. He was the guy that became the focal point of the scouting reports when playing St. Mary's. He was the guy who changed games for this team. And as the season went along, you saw that he was able to make adjustments here and there. But in the second round in WCC play, you saw teams make adjustments to him. Gonzaga made adjustments to him. BYU started to make adjustments. Santa Clara started to make adjustments. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the adjustments always worked, but in Gonzaga's case, it absolutely did. UConn replicated some of those challenges. VCU replicated some of those challenges in the NCAA tournament. And we saw him struggle down the stretch later in the season. Now, part of that is going to be he was a true freshman. He's still learning the physicality of the game and how teams adjust, and he's going to have to learn how to adjust back. That's the challenge for this year. Can Aidan Mahaney come around and make the adjustments that are going to be necessary to be able to be successful this time around? I mean, he's going to be the lead on any scout for teams going into this season. He's been one of the more talked about players in all of college basketball going into the year. He is a star, and there's no way to get around that. He is probably one of the more decorated freshmen coming out of St. Mary's, or like one of the more successful freshmen going into his second year at St. Mary's. The only two that are even comparable to what Mahaney has done in year one is going to be Matthew Dellavedova or Patty Mills. those are really the only two who really kind of match up to the level of play, and then you can you can argue between those three of who actually was better. But again, Mahaney is going to be is a key component to what St. Mary's does this year. His increased strength, his ability to adjust, because we know like he can score, and it's just going to be a matter of how he's able to evolve his game going into year two. And obviously it's not all Mahaney, because this team is deep. This team is really deep. And I think one of the guys that I think is going to be a huge component to this year, and I think a lot of people who have watched also are in this camp. Justin Joyner, who St. Mary's associate head coach, who came on earlier in the summer, we talked about this then, is the progress of Augustas Marciulionis and what he is going to mean for this team. This was a guy who he has in year one. He was the starter initially, and then Tommy Kuzi took over. He was the starter initially last year, and then Aidan Mahaney took over. So he's had opportunities, and it didn't look great at times. But what we saw toward the end of last year was his growing leadership and how he was able to step up in those moments in which Mahaney struggled a bit more. We saw it in the NCAA tournament. We saw it against UConn. We saw it against VCU. Marciulionis was starting to take more of that role, be more assertive offensively, and that's something that is going to be critical for St. Mary's, is how he is able to make that leap, how he is able to make that jump. He's going to be one of the starters in that backcourt with Mahaney going into the year. And so this year, I fully expect him to remain in the starting lineup for the duration of the year. I think this is a year where we do see a big jump from him. So I think it's going to just be something to watch for. I really like the progression he's had, so I expect big things out of Marciulionis. Mitchell Saxon, I think we're just going to see continued growth from him. I think like what we saw a year ago is just a preview of what he's going to become this coming year. They're so deep at that down low. Not only do you have him, you have Joshua Jefferson, who I am really high on. I think he's going to be really good for St. Mary's. You also bring back Mason Forbes, the Harvard transfer. He didn't play last year. He's going to be playing a key role. Having that veteran experience on that team is going to be a huge thing for this team. And then the guy I am just waiting to see him break out is Harry Wessels, the big 7'1" bruising center. We saw how quickly he was taken to the game. He was a late starter to the game of basketball, so he is still learning the sport. He's still learning how to play this game. And we just saw like how he was picking it up last year, how he played against Gonzaga, how he played against UConn. He was so important against UConn because he was the only guy that they could throw in to match up just with sheer size against the likes of Donovan Clingan, the UConn center. Like this was a guy that you needed down the stretch. And again, another true freshman. He's going to still be learning how to go into his role. But something that was mentioned at Media Day and then also has been out there is Harry Wessels' mile time. And Mahaney has talked about it. Duke has talked about it. Just this is a frightening thing. So this is a guy who is the 7'1", 265, and he ran a 5:15 mile over the summer. This just, which sounds just terrifying to hear that someone that big can run a mile that fast. But I think it speaks to the conditioning level of where he is now and how much work he has put in over the summer, that this guy is going to be a key component. And I do think we're going to see a lot of minutes from him. It'll be interesting to see kind of how that's balanced with Mitchell Saxon, because obviously that is your established all-league center, and he's going to still need a breather. He's still going to need time to really be at his peak. but this might be the best 1-2 at the center position that St. Mary's has had in a very long time, which might actually make it so that Saxon doesn't have to be playing heavy minutes earlier on in the season. And then the other one that really stands out to me is the freshman coming in, Jordan Ross. And he is the complement to Aidan Mahaney. Aidan Mahaney is the score first guard. Jordan Ross is your traditional point guard, the pass first point guard. He was playing for Arizona Compass Prep this past year. He was in the ESPN Top 100. So this is a kid who is going to make an impact, I think, very early on. He, I think, fits the Randy Bennett system well. This is going to be the first time, I think, not in a while, but definitely the first time where you're going to see a couple of point guards in the rotation on a regular basis on the court at the same time. Logan Johnson wasn't really a ball handler in that respect, but we've seen this a number of times throughout Randy Bennett's tenure where he likes to have the 2 point guards set up, where it was Emmett Naar, Jordan Ford, Emmett Naar, Joe Rahan, the Mickey McConnell, Matthew Dellavedova. You've had a number of times we've seen him with 2 point guard sets, either in the starting lineup or regular rotations on the floor. So I think this gives St. Mary's the opportunity to run those sets again, something we haven't seen in a long time. I think we also will get that a little bit more. That's Mahaney and Marshallonis as well. So they now have the guard set where you have ball handlers everywhere. And I think that's going to be a huge thing for St. Mary's going into the season. And I don't want to undersell or ignore what I think was maybe one of the biggest moves of the offseason, one of the most important, maybe the most important thing of the offseason, which was Alex Ducas's return. When that was announced at the end of year banquet, I was surprised to see that Alex Ducas was going to return. I thought that for sure that once Logan Johnson and Kyle Bowen left, he would go as well. His return means a lot because there were going to be questions about who starts at the 3 if he is not there. As much as I think Luke Barrett is a key cog in what St. Mary's is going to do, I would not put him at the level of an Alex Ducas. Alex Ducas is going to be one of the clear leaders of this team. He is one of the best, if not the best, 3-point shooter on this team. He's one of the toughest guys on this team. His return, I think, meant a lot and changed the way I thought that it changed the ceiling of which I thought this team had. I think that this team had a ceiling of getting in, maybe they were an 8 or a 9 seed, maybe a little bit lower than that, 10. Without Ducas. With him, they're back to being closer to that 5 seed where they were a year ago. And I do think he makes that much of a difference. And maybe, again, reading too much into it or not, I think that was also apparent in the game against UConn the second he went out, and it changed the game. So overall for this team, the St. Mary's team has a lot of talent. They have huge upside. I think their schedule is going to allow them a lot of opportunities to pick up good wins, much like a year ago. You can even make the case that this schedule might be even tougher than a year ago. There may not be that. They're not playing Houston this year or a game of that caliber, but I mean, there's a lot of potential in here. They played New Mexico back in Moraga. This was a New Mexico team that beat them a year ago, one of the best backcourts in the country. They'll be playing San Diego State at the Continental Tires Classic. Then they'll get either Xavier or Washington. They have Utah, Boise State. They're at Colorado State, UNLV, Kent State. All these are really good games for St. Mary's. I think that this gives them a lot of opportunity to be able to build that resume, to maybe get back to a 5 seed, maybe get right in that window. I don't know if they can be any higher than that. I think they'd really have to dominate the league. I think they'd have to win the league outright. be the WCC tournament champion to get above that 5 seed line, but it gives them a good shot. I also think that this is a team that can make the second weekend. I thought that a year ago. I think they just had a bad draw a year ago because UConn being a 4 seed, as we saw, like they were underseeded. There is no way they should have been a 4 seed. They should have been higher. But that's kind of how it goes sometimes. So regardless of whether they were underseeded or whatnot, they got to the second round the last couple of years. So their building blocks are there. I think this team is capable of taking that next step. If they are able to take that next step, we know this team has a lot of young talent on it. And it really does seem that something is building here. Something big is actually building at St. Mary's. And I don't know exactly how far they have the potential to advance, but Jeff Goodman did pick St. Mary's to finish in the Final Four, to reach the Final Four, which obviously would be a huge thing for St. Mary's if that were to happen. I don't know if I want to put expectations all the way up there because a lot of things have to go right. It's so much about luck of the draw in the tournament, who gets hot at the right time, all of those sorts of things. But this team is battle tested. This team knows how to win. They've shown they can win in the NCAA tournament. So now it's just a matter of putting the pieces together and making it happen. So there's a lot of potential. I think this team is probably going to be 1-2. They're going to be 1-2 with Gonzaga again. I don't know if I'm fully set on them being the number one team outright, because I think Gonzaga is going to be right up there with them by the time conference play rolls around. But ceiling for this team is going to be second weekend of the tournament. First place in the first place WCC, first place they win the conference tournament. The low end, they're probably like an 8 or a 9 seed, and then it's, well, good luck in that first game, and then you'll end up with a 1 seed and probably get bounced. But the fact that the expectation is no longer can they, but it's where in the tournament will they be, is a big difference for this team now. Is a big difference because now everyone recognizes that this St. Mary's team is not should they be in? It's how dangerous are they once they get there? That is now the case for St. Mary's. That is now what is being talked about with this team. So high expectations, a lot of excitement that can be built around St. Mary's going into the year. Randy Bennett in his 23rd season. So we'll see how this all plays out. We'll see where this goes. And it's going to be exciting to see this team play all year long. They're going to be playing way more up-tempo, I think, than we saw in years past. Offensive weapons everywhere for this team.